Welcome to Push to Pass podcast with JP Murray, a discussion about business, racing, sports, and life. This podcast delivers insights on what makes businesses, teams, and people successful based on real-life business experiences. Following a career with America's largest associations, JP Murray founded the Murray Company, one of Washington, D.C.'s most successful consulting firms. The company was acquired successfully and enabled him to launch JP Murray Racing, a business development and sponsorship agency for auto racing teams. Here is JP.
Hello, welcome to the Push to Pass podcast. Today, I would like to tell you about some shortcomings that I had as a business leader, probably still do, and then some observations about the boss I wanted to be a little bit more consistently. First, I will say this could be a never-ending loop of content about my leadership shortcomings. These aren't the only things, but they're the items I'm willing to share with you. First, I felt that rules didn't really apply to me. This is entitled behavior that maybe I did use on occasion because I knew there weren't ramifications. I couldn't be disciplined. I couldn't be given a bad review by a peer or terminated by the company. So it's almost that this is a comfortable or dangerous corporate blanket that leaders can have, especially if they're privately held. Because in many ways, these little corporate sins don't have an immediate impact. But what does happen is if you are in effect taking withdrawals from the relationship account of your team, over time that's damaging and the account is overdrawn and folks will leave, and that's a bad thing for your company. So this behavior reared its head often when I was stressed or overwhelmed, and that is when you really need to be your best. So here are typical boss card bad behaviors that I was guilty of. Number one, emails on the weekend or late at night. Yep, I sent work to folks most often just to get them out of my head and keep things moving. But now I recognize how disruptive that could be when your team member might be investing valuable time into personal relationships or, frankly, working on some of their priorities at your company. You've ripped them out of that scenario and put yourself at the top of the list. That is arrogant. The second thing, vulgarity. Wrong and very sorry. There's nothing else really to say other than I'm comfortable with it. I grew up in rural Oklahoma near farms in the oil field. Not that that's an excuse, but it was common. A blue streak could almost be a piece of art from some guys that I grew up with. And frankly, I didn't cuss out people, but I cussed out situations, maybe to show my passion or that I cared. But now, upon reflection, that was so unprofessional and bullying, especially when you had young people and frankly, females in the office. Man, God, that was a mistake. Number three, the last win was most important. Frankly, people can get in a slump, and I didn't support them enough through those. I may have withheld my love or treated them differently because of the booking sheet and what its current status was with that person. To be honest, I knew in most cases people were giving it their best. What I should have done is actually engage them more and provide additional opportunity to improve tactics or strategies instead of pulling away from them. Number four, special authority. This is the classic I'm the boss narrative. Pulled it out occasionally, not often, probably when I didn't have a very good case, but it was always there. Sometimes if I believed something strongly, I just said, hey, I'm the boss and we're doing it this way. I had the ace. And it likely affected the candid feedback that you need from staff to run a great company because they think that, hey, when the chips are down or when the boss feels strongly about something, he's always going to do what he says. And that's frankly not a great scenario. So this is just a start. But if you lead a team, it could be a good time to evaluate what things you need to change that could have a detrimental effect on your whole leadership structure. What is the behavior you would not accept from others, but you're actually guilty of? And evaluate it and change it. Now, how about some positive things that helped us thrive, or I would give myself a passing grade on? First, is transparency. I show the numbers on my small privately held company regularly so others might understand why I made certain decisions. Certainly made me feel better that I wasn't keeping a lot of secrets. Number 2, regular feedback. Weekly one-on-ones, quarterly reviews, and annual performance evaluations kept folks from being blindsided about their performance. And, more often than not, we did a pretty good job on that, especially for a small company. Number 3 was work ethic example. I was probably a pretty good example at hustling and working hard and not being too good to do any kind of task. I would take out the trash literally and figuratively. If the boss isn't an example of work ethic, then how do you expect something extraordinary to happen from your team members? Hey, I hope this content is helpful for you today. I've got a final favor to ask. If you listen to this podcast, would you share it on your social platforms? I'm starting from scratch with this new Push to Pass format and growing listeners every episode, but frankly, your endorsement is much more valuable than anything that I can do in self-promotion. So thanks for helping me out with that. I look forward to visiting with you next week on the Push to Pass podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Push to Pass podcast with JP Murray, a discussion about business, racing, sports, and life. If you would like to sponsor Push to Pass, send an email to jp@jpmurray.com. Follow JP on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. His website is jpmurray.com. Until next time, push yourself to pass the competition. Thanks for listening.